So I'm Marguerite Sexton. I go by Marguerite, Marge, or Margie. While I'm happily married for 44 years last week, I don't go by Mrs. I just like my name. And if we have to have something preceding that, I would choose Ms., but generally choose nothing, just my name. And the last
Okay.
thing I ever want is to go by my Mrs. Thomas Sexton. That would never work for me.
Okay, so my name is Dawn Wilson. I'm the host of WilZil
Yes,
podcast, and I've spoken with Miss Marge, who's agreed to speak with me. I reached out to her on social media because of a post she made. So I want to thank you. I do know you are 83 years old. You shared that with me.
yes,
And just to summarize our brief conversation, your mom died when you were 8 years old.
correct.
Your dad died when you were 18 years old, and
Yes,
he abused alcohol. And
yes,
then you also lost your son about 10 years ago at the age of 47 to
yes,
suicide.
yes,
So I also know one great thing about what you're doing right now is you're a co-author for the 12 steps of mindful aging with your
correct.
younger sister.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a very sweet experience and it's going quite nicely. Yeah.
So I know it's a heavy topic this evening that we will walk through, and the goal is to share your story, share your journey with grief with us so that others might find hope throughout it, love, and you can share how you got through those tough times. So tell us where you are today. Let's start with that. Where are you today?
Such an interesting question. Uh, I'm doing really well. And when my son first died, I couldn't imagine that I could continue to breathe. But here I am, 10 years and 4 months later. And just today, I live in an over 65 community here in Northeast Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Protestant Home. And just today, for the first time, I had a little bit of irreverent fun regarding something around my son's death. And I and afterwards I thought, oh, she must think I'm terrible, you know? How could I talk about that and laugh? She must think I'm insane, you know? Uh, and then my son would have thought it was hilarious, you know? But the grief process is so complex that if you have too much fun, if you have any fun around it, it's like you're not taking it seriously enough. So, but in retrospect, that was a couple hours ago. And and I just feel like that was a healthy, really healthy thing to do. And would you like me to give you the details of what it was? Just
I'm open to whatever you want to share with
sure.
us.
When my son died by suicide, and and it was on Christmas morning of 2015. So when we went to his home, and on his bed was sort of a burnt orange color, a running shirt, and it looked like he probably used it like it's a night shirt. There was this laying on his bed, and I figured I grabbed it, and I thought it looks like the last thing he wore. So I brought it home with me and I wear it every now and then. It's especially nice. It's chilly here. You wear it under a sweater or something on a chilly day. And I don't wear it often. I wear it a couple of times a year. And and today I wore it because I went out for a long walk. And I came back, and where I live, there's a little group of people that around. There's a cocktail hour here, and there's a little group of people that hang out at the cocktail hour. And I'm usually not one, but there was a beer special going on, so I found myself drawn to that. And a person next to me noticed a mark on my shirt. And I said, "Oh yeah, oh, yeah, I know that's there." And then I said, "Can I tell you about the shirt?" She said, "Okay." I said, I told her my son died. It was on the bed when he died. And so I took it and I said to her, and I said, "I have something to tell you. I've never washed it." I said, "So if you're ever around me and it smells, you just tell me and I'll make sure I finally wash it, right?" And she said, "It doesn't smell, it doesn't smell." She said, "But I wouldn't tell you anyway." I said, "Well, I hope somebody would." And I said, my son would be appalled to think of wearing it for 10 years and have never washed it. I said, "No, I don't wear it often. I wear it a couple times a year, you know?" And and then the person next to her said, "What is she saying? She doesn't wash." And this friend said, "You don't want to know. You do not want to know, you know?" And and I really kind of laughed about it because she didn't experience child loss. And if you haven't experienced it and you're talking to somebody that's telling this little bit of a bizarre story, it's like this woman is really, she's like lost her mind, you know. But there was the first time I've ever actually been able to take something that's sacred to me, it's really sacred to me, and use it to laugh about it. I've always say to my husband, when I'm wearing this, if you notice it smells, you got to tell me. I'm nose blind to it, you know?
Yeah. What a beautiful story to share, and the fact that we can sit here tonight in 2026 and you share something so precious and we can smile about it, right? So it gives others hope because
Yes.
I'm sure it wasn't easy journey. It's been 10 years.
Oh,
Um,
it's so hard.
Thank
So,
you for
so
sharing
hard.
that. That is so beautiful because it's going to touch people to know that, obviously you couldn't laugh about this probably 5 years ago, 3 years,
Oh,
but
right.
now within time. And for me, listening to you, it goes back to the love you had for your son,
Yeah.
that you're able to reflect about it and even laugh and say, my son wouldn't have me doing this. He'd want me to wash this shirt. But you're holding on to his scent. I imagine
And it's
it gives
his,
you
what I know,
comfort.
I think his scent is long gone, but I know his DNA is in there. You know, his DNA is there, and I'm not going to wash that out until I have to, you know. So,
I would probably do the same thing, especially after hearing your story.
yes,
So I want to take you back before then. We mentioned you lost your mom at 8. What do you remember about your mom? That was such a young age.
that was really, really awful. It was the fourth of five children. And by the way, are we thinking that this will be an hour? We'll be
Yes.
okay. I thought so. Um,
If you
and
want longer with me, you can.
if I what?
You want to stay longer with me, you can.
Okay,
You're welcome.
we're getting along fine. So, um, I was the fourth of five children, and money was very tight. And my dad worked during the day, he was a letter carrier, and my mom worked at a local manufacturing company a couple of miles away. And my mom had epileptic seizures, and this was 1951. So what I remember is being home, and my father got a call or a message. I don't know if we even had a phone, but we probably did, that mom was sick at work. So when we didn't have a car, a neighbor came and took him, and we had a grandfather who lived with us too. And my oldest brother was like 13. And so I remember my dad being gone, and there was a lot of anxiety. And when he walked in the house with a neighbor, And I really remember this clearly, even after all these years. He walked in the house and we all said, where's mom? Where's mom? And he had was gone for a long time. And he said, she's dead. And like there was like pandemonium in the house. I mean, I just remember like pandemonium, like screaming and crying. And that was just so hard. And so often through the years, I've thought about how different your life is when you lose your mother. You don't know when you're a kid because you adapt to whatever it is you have to adapt to keep going on. You adapt. And we became a very tight little group of kids, that loved and cared for each other. And we had our own sense of humor and we were very irreverent children. And and uh, and we were never abused by anybody. But there was a lot of chaos and a lot of things not cared for. That and then when, as the kids grew, I feel like the older kids kind of got out when they could to start their own life. And first was our oldest brother, who's still alive, which is great. He just turned 90. And then my sister, she got married when she was like 19. And then the next one, the brother joined the military. So it was me and my sister Pat, the co-author. And and then our dad died. He got cancer and he was very sick for a couple of years. And our grandfather who lived, there's a lot of loss in my story. I got to tell you right now. My grandfather got sick with cancer and he died. And he was 93 when he died. And then exactly 1 year to the day after he died, my father died. But he had been sick with throat cancer for several years. And and somehow I was like primary caregiver as it turned out through my high school years and even I started work. I got a job out of school. College wasn't even an option. So he died, and then my sister and I, Pat and I, moved in with our older sister and her husband, who lived very close by. And she had started a family, and she died of breast cancer very young. And she was like our mom figure after our mother died, even though she was a teenager. When you're a little kid, the teenagers are like grown up people. Um, so she
Oh,
and her husband cared for us and she died. So that was very hard because she had 6 children and my sister and I took a lot of care of her children and her husband remarried and that had its own complexity. But we embraced her as our sister-in-law because she was the stepmother to our sister's children. So, and we're still close to those kids. They're wonderful kids, wonderful part of our life. And then, had my own children, and had then two of my sister's children moved in with me, and my first husband, and for a couple of years until their dad remarried. So then I
let me
divorced. What?
let me take you back to when you were 18. That's when you lost your dad,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So what do you want to share with us about alcoholism? And you said he passed from cancer as well.
Yeah, he did. And the thing is, my dad was a really sweet man, and he just I think of he died of a broken heart, really. They were only together for 13 years, and he adored her, and people, neighbors, everybody always told us they were sort of like it was a small town and they were like everybody's favorite young couple raising these kids and all. everybody loved them. They had a lot of life and laughter and fun, and people gathered at their house. And so my primary years, I do remember a lot of activity in the house, piano playing, people singing, and all that. So when she died suddenly, it hurt. It hurt so many people. A lot of people's world seemed to stop, you know. And my dad was devastated, and he was only 41 years old, and he had five kids, you know, and he was doing his best. My grandfather lived with us, who was the father of my mother. So there's some built-in tension right there. That's another whole story. Um, but he only lived for 10 years, and I remember him saying, when he would be drinking, I only want to live long enough to raise you kids. Like the light went out of him, you know? And I remember worrying about us if we would get sick. He would be so frantically worried because he had no idea what to do. And there didn't seem like there was anybody helping him, you know? Except I will say this, wait a minute. There were actually some relatives that wanted to, like, different ones wanted to take us different, but not everybody wanted five kids, you know. But he was one of seven kids, and different ones wanted to take one of the kids, and he was absolutely not going to have us separated. And I'm really grateful to him for that, that we weren't raised separately. So
Yeah,
that was hard. That was hard. Yeah.
I can just imagine because that's a young age for you and your siblings.
I remember
And
I was working, he was sick at home, and I worried about him all the time because he had throat cancer, and he had tracheotomy. And I worked right next to the local hospital, right down the street from it. And so many times if I'd hear an ambulance go by, I would get this sick feeling inside. I would just call home, just say, "Hi, Dad, how you doing?" Just to make sure he wasn't in it, until he was in it, you know? Um, yeah, that was
so,
hard.
how would you say it shaped your life at that point at 18?
There was so much responsibility. As a teenager, I never could rebel, you know? My,
Yeah.
my big rebellion was like falling in love with Elvis Presley, and what could be safer than that? Be in love with somebody that couldn't possibly get you pregnant, right?
Yeah.
So, so I couldn't rebel because he was already in such pain. Like if I would say, "Dad, can I go to ask him?" He'd say, "Well, what does Nancy's mom say? You know, what's she allowed to do?" And he was always counting on me to tell the truth. So I I just was a good kid, you know. I
Tell us
just
about your son. What are you
um
comfortable sharing with about him that we should know? What would you want the world to know about him?
well, his name was Ron, and he was really my first child, my firstborn son, and I have another son, his brother Joe, fortunately is alive and well and close to us. But Ron was funny and smart, and in retrospect, more troubled than we realized. He suffered from bipolar disorder, which he self-diagnosed. Um, and he suffered from it. He was brilliant at masking it. He was brilliant at it. He was so high functioning. He had a job, an excellent job in technology. Um, Made solid money and was generous with all of us with it. And in retrospect, when you lose someone to suicide, you you go through every moment you can, pull every thread to see what you didn't see. And maybe he was too generous. Maybe I swear, as his mom, I feel like, did I breastfeed him long enough? Did I, everything that you did as a mom is under scrutiny when your child dies by suicide. And to, and that's just what you do. And you sometimes take their decision out of it almost. It's almost because you're the mom. You're almost like the God figure. You created this person, you know, they're supposed to bury you. And how could it be that you see people that are seemingly more inept that seem to raise perfectly normal kids to adulthood, you know? But anyway, he was a joy. He was a joy. He was a fun and funny kid always. He had a hilarious sense of humor. When so my kid's dad and I divorced, and like 3 years later, I married Tom, my who was my husband of 44 years. He brought three kids into the marriage, and we all lived in the same town. The kids knew each other. So the boys were 15, 14, 13, 12, and we had and a little girl 7. And Ron was the one, he seemed to be able to, if there was like tension in the house or something, he could just pick up a word or pick up a phrase or pick up a pause in it and throw something in it that was like so hilarious that everybody would like burst out laughing or something, you know. Um, he traveled a lot in his work. He traveled to Germany in his work. And like for my 65th birthday, he took Tom and me to Germany, and he was there for business, and we had a wonderful like long weekend there with him. And and then he lived in California for a while. He had three loves in his life, strong relationships with women that did not end in marriage. And that's another thing I often think back on. Lovely women that did not turn into marriage. And I really believe that the greatest disappointment in his life was that he didn't find a partner to go through life with. I think that was very painful because he had a lot of love. He was a very loving son, very sweet son. And he moved to California for a while on business for his job. And and he was there for about 5 years. And I think that was the most successful time in his adult life, professionally and socially. Had a great group of friends there. He had a relationship with a young woman. They fell in love. He had a great job. We used to go out and visit him once or twice a year, and it was like going on vacation with your own concierge because he would have everything, planned ahead of time and take us to places that he was so anxious for us to see and meet his co-workers and meet his friends. Yeah, he
Sounds amazing.
such a good guy, such a good guy. And it's not that I was unaware of his struggle. I was, but not to the extent. Oh, and you know what, though, 10 years prior to the end of his life, he went through what a terrible crisis period. And it was what I thought of at the time was like a midlife crisis, completely like melted down. Um, was out of work at his job for 3 months, and his brother went and got him and brought him to our house. He stayed with us for 3 months and he was under treatment with psychiatrists, a psychologist, medication. In the beginning, it was almost like he was catatonic. It was so painful at the time. And gradually, he came out of it. And I mean, one day what happened when it all came down one day, it happened to be 1 year on Ash Wednesday. This is just a little bit of an aside. So many things in Ron's story are connected to some kind of a spiritual day. So we we were raised in the Catholic tradition, and I'm not that adamantly Catholic, but there are so many things that happen with Ron on these days that I'm aware of that have a connection to some holy day. That it's quite remarkable, really. It happened to be Ash Wednesday that he had this particular kind of meltdown, and he was supposed to call in work. He was supposed to call in. He was supposed to facilitate a meeting, like worldwide in a way, of people all over the world on his team. He had to facilitate it at like 10 o'clock in the morning, our time. And he just he was he like curled up in a fetal position, and called his girlfriend. He had a girlfriend at the time, and she worked there, and she managed it. She handled it, and she she called in, and she just said that there was an emergency, and that he would not be calling in, and she didn't know when he would be in, and she was very wise in handling it and saying, "You don't tell them anything. You don't tell them anything."
Oh yeah.
You know, and uh, And then he was like, my career is over, my life is over. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I would be like, it doesn't matter what you do after this. It doesn't matter what you do after this. Just get through this time. And after 3 months and gradually, working on himself, working with therapists, doing everything he's supposed to do, he came back like the light came back. And And he said, I'm gonna just call in work, and I'm just gonna call in and let them know that I'm here." And he called, and then his manager said, "Well, when do you think he can come back?" I mean, there was like no, that's how good he was at his job, that, just come back.
Met him, yeah.
Yeah, just come back.
Well, that's good.
So then it was 10 more years. So we thought that was just crazy. He got over that. We didn't realize that was kind of lurking underground in a way.
Well,
Yeah,
understandably so, because other than those couple of times that you said he had a meltdown, he was the happiest person in the room to get everyone going.
he was. He functions so well. So when he came back from California, he bought a condo nearby, and it was sort of like this. He'd have us over for the big holidays, and he'd have his friends over for football games, and you know he knew how to be a wonderful host.
So take us to the moment when everything changed. Share with us what you want us to know, what you experienced when it happened.
Okay. I knew going up to that Christmas, I sensed that it was not in a good place emotionally. First of all, he was in touch with us. Well, he would be in touch with us a lot, and then he wasn't in touch with us very much. So I would call him, and and I just sort of had a sense there was like a flatness in his responses and all. But we set everything up. He was going to be with us. He was going to go to mass with us on Christmas morning, and uh, we were going to my sister's and to be with her family Christmas Day. So, um, like the day before, he sent me a text. He said, "What time is mass tomorrow?" And so I called him. I'm sure I called him because I looked at my text messages afterwards, and I hadn't answered him. So I'm sure I called him to tell him what time it was and what time we would be there. Okay. So that morning, we where we go to mass, it was a tiny little, it was not like a traditional Catholic church. It was a more, it's called Medical Mission Sisters. It's like a where nuns live, and there's a little small round chapel. So we got there and we waited outside of it for him to show up because it was always on time. And he wasn't, it was time to go inside and he wasn't there. So I had this little feeling of concern, and I texted him. I said, "We're here. Where are you?" And he didn't answer. So we went in and mass started, and we sat. The place, it was circular, and I sat where I could look at the door to see when he would come in, like the back door. And mass started, and I had been asked to do a reading there, and the reading was like, it was an interpretive scripture from Old Testament, and it had to do with God God loving us like the love of a mother for a child. And as I was reading that, I just had this sense that, like, I'm reading this, this has to do with me and Ron. Something in this is about us. I know it. So I put the reading down and finished. And I said to Tom, something's wrong. We have to go. We have to go. So we got up and left. And it's a small place and everybody knows us there. And so our leaving was obvious. And I just whispered to somebody on the way out, something's wrong. Our son didn't show up, and everybody knew him. He'd show up there with us occasionally.